Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We are happy to have you. We are just going to give it a couple of seconds, like 30 seconds or so, for everyone to get settled and joined. Maybe you have some coffee, a water, something to enjoy our chat this fine day. So we'll give it a couple seconds and then we'll jump right in. Looks like we have a good amount of folks joining. So why don't we get started? We're going to just kind of start with some housekeeping anyway. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining our webinar today, Laying the Data Foundation for Agentic IT Operations. I am excited for our discussion. I think you'll all find it quite relevant to your day-to-day. Yeah, so today's webinar, it is being recorded. You can simply come back to this URL after the fact and be able to find the recording. You can share it easily with any colleagues or folks that you'd like to see this as well. We'll also be following up with you after this webinar, so you kind of have some additional resources, and we'll share the link there as well. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to raise them in the chat. You can see the little question mark icon in the panel for Bright Talk. So feel free to get them there. We'll try to address questions throughout the conversation. If we don't, we'll certainly follow up with you after the fact. And as far as what we're going to be discussing today, so talking about, again, kind of this laying the data foundation for laying the data foundation for agentic IT operations. This is all based on an ebook that we recently launched last month, and we felt like this was a great opportunity to talk through it live because, again, this is based on some of the learnings that we have had with some of our customers, and we think that will be really beneficial to many folks that are joining today. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit just around like the introduction of AI, how that is really transforming what we have known as AI ops into agentic IT operations in this new world of possibilities. We want to talk through some of the challenges and the misnomers that exist in the world and kind of taking over that narrative when it comes to AI capabilities. Then we'll talk a little bit about what do we mean when we say an incremental, phased, progressive data strategy. What does that really mean? What does that look like? And then we're really going to dig into it, especially with C here, and really talk about what it means to build your own incremental data strategy within your organization that helps you to meet your goals and deliver measurable success for your teams and for your business. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we'll be discussing today. I'm Katie Petrillo. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at BigPanda. Been here just for about 2 years or so and really kind of have been immersed in this incident management, IT operations world, and excited to drive our conversation. And I'm joined by C here. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm C. Beers. I'm a Principal Digital Transformation Architect at BigPanda, going on about 3 years. About 20 years in the industry, 10 years of AI ops, and for BigPanda, just really focused on process analysis and improvement for the enterprise and enterprise transformation.
Awesome. All exciting topics that I know folks here are interested in hearing about. So without further ado, why don't we get started? I really want to talk a little bit about, we talked about kind of in the agenda, this, where BigPanda is coming from, this world of AI ops. Now we're really changing our narrative and talking a lot about agentic. And that's really the reason that we're here today is AI. It's having a really big impact on all aspects of your team's day-to-day, the tools they're using, how they interact with the other teams, their day-to-day processes. And the foundation of all of that is feeding the AI capabilities is the data strategy. And traditionally, we have been very reliant on a data strategy that leverages very machine-based structured data. We're all familiar with those very human-based rules-built automation, and it's it's time consuming, it's expensive, but that's really what you need to do in order to make the technology work. And, we know there's a lot of gaps with that kind of that approach, right? One being, I think many folks here probably either have some type of event management or are exploring some type of event management. But the reality is that event management tool, which you're using to gain clarity on what are the top priority issues, how do you know what to prioritize, focus on, how do you resolve it? That's really only looking at a small portion of your data, typically around a third of the data that your teams are looking at every single day. And that's focused on your structured data, which requires that human to be able to set up and to maintain all of that, what we're kind of calling semi-structured or unstructured data, whether that is an ITSM ticket, a run book, a chat log, a bridge call transcript, all that sort of tribal institutional knowledge. It remains untapped and not accessible to that system, right? And that obviously creates a lot of gaps. More so, a lot of these tools and systems where all this data lives tends to be quite fragmented and siloed. We know teams don't necessarily talk to each other. Your observability or ITSM, your change tools, they may integrate in some capacity, but not in others. And so that, results in teams really needing to rely on their CMDB and keep that maintained to reflect this sort of live state of the infrastructure, your applications, your services. But we all know that is challenging. For one, that requires all those humans to be able to bring together all of those pieces and kind of, build all of those dependencies, put them all into one place. It's very time consuming. It's very expensive, and it doesn't tend to be accurate because as soon as you update it, it tends to be inaccurate, once you kind of say, okay, we're done, because of the constantly evolving nature of the infrastructure. And then there's still, of course, just kind of natural blind spots that come up because this traditional approach to IT monitoring has really focused on sort of within the four walls of your organization, right? Like all of your infrastructure, application services, but more and more frequently, and we talk to many of our customers that are dependent on third-party services or applications. Of course, there's also, internet. So when outages happen in those areas, how do you know that they're impacting? How do you know they're occurring? How do you know they're impacting your services and in what way? And so that ends up also just kind of causing a lot of blind spots that result in a lot of manual toil and wasted time when it comes to issues within the organization. But what we're seeing is really, these are all gaps that AI can help to fit in, right? And I think the crux of that comes down to the fact that AI and agentic does not require just looking at all that structured data and all of those very heavy static rules based. It really can make do with more of this, like what we're calling knowledge, right? Like unstructured, semi-structured data. And that allows you to really rethink your data strategy. So we can really move from this kind of static data approach to a really, dynamic operational intelligence layer. And that is really based on the fact that you don't no longer have to be confined to that CMDB and all those structured data feeds that are going into your event management, but kind of going beyond that. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. But then also you can not just kind of apply straightforward sort of analysis of that data, but really approaching it with some like dynamic reasoning. You can make sense of a really quite large array of data, knowledge. It adapts based on feedback that you're providing to it, adapts based on the environment, adapts based on sort of how humans are interacting with that data, so that kind of operational intelligence layer starts to get smarter and smarter with time. And then when you have, this really solid base of information and knowledge that you are comfortable with and confident in with your organization, that really unlocks the ability to automate processes, right? So rather than focusing again kind of on things that only can be set up based on rules, you can have this dynamic and adaptive automation that really helps to like meet the evolving needs of your organization, and especially within an incident. And if we take a look at like what that really means, many organizations are kind of looking at their data strategy as what you kind of see here, really just focusing on this machine level data, structured data sources that are coming from your CMDB, they're coming from your observability tools. And this is what really reflects sort of the live state of your infrastructure. But as we talked about, there are some gaps in that. And I think there's a lot of opportunity when we start to look at agentic capabilities to build this AI native data model, right? And that takes into account so many other different types of data and knowledge that tend to exist in these hybrid cloud environments that many of you are working within now. It's not just about that machine data. That is one piece of it, absolutely. But you also have all this organizational knowledge, right? Which is that sort of human layer of context that doesn't fit into a CMDB. Think about tacit knowledge that of understanding how a problem was solved in the past, sort of which actions are most important, things that come from run books, service desk tickets, standard operating procedures, also coming from things like bridge calls. I think a great example of this is you may have had an incident where someone was on a call, they knew how to solve the issue, they outlined those steps right there on the call, someone took note, and then they went and did it. That never got documented anywhere, right? So the next time that similar issue comes up, you're at a loss, right? Even though if that person is on PTO, maybe they left the organization, you don't have access to their brain. With something like this, where you can capture that knowledge and document that transcript, identify that was what resolved the issue, put that into that kind of knowledge graph, that operational intelligence layer, that allows you to make better decisions based on historical issues and paths, and just ultimately offers more of a resilient way to look at your data. And then you have all of this sort of AI sensing data, right? This is where the ability to use the AI to perceive sort of signals that are coming from the organization that detect issues, they infer what's going on, they see and understand patterns from this very broad set of data that doesn't necessarily have to be, is not instrumented or overseen by a human operator. Of course, you provide feedback and interact with that to kind of hone that and refine that over time. But it really, this is where you start to have that dynamic aspect to your data and knowledge. That again, just sort of starts to get smarter and smarter and allows you to identify more issues and patterns than you would when you're dealing with humans on their own. And what this really starts to allow is, when I think about where we're coming from AI ops, where it's really around gaining efficiency, we're really now more so talking around how do we become these autonomous digital operators within an incident and within the INO organization. And I think this is what do I mean by that is that I think about like what AI ops was meant to do is really help teams to make these smarter, faster decisions, right? Which is important. Using machine learning, using AI-based analysis. But when you really start to leverage agents across all of your different data sets and knowledge to retrieve information, analyze it, suggest actions on behalf of your teams, you're really starting to like rethink the incident life cycle and start to automate that from end to end. We talked about the data piece, right? Not just aggregating and analyzing, but you're now, if you have access to all these different data sources, you're able to do that cross-domain correlation. That's huge. That's allowing you to really be able to see the complete impact and extent of an issue across the organization, so you can hone in right on the actual root cause, get the right teams involved right from the start. When I think about AI ops, I think one of the biggest things that it was really focused around was reducing alert noise and improving that prioritization. Now, if we take that sort of cross-domain correlation, we're putting all of this rich insight, putting it into that operational intelligence layer that your teams can go back to, the agents can go back to time and time again. You're really understanding patterns at scale and being able to then not just respond to those issues faster, but actually predict when one might be happening and get ahead of it and maybe stop it from happening in the first place. Like that is the holy grail. And when you're able to do that, now you move the conversation from we're reducing downtime and the associated costs of just, resolving incidents to like, okay, how can I be more efficient with my headcount? How can I be more efficient with my outsource spend? How can I be more efficient with our tooling? That is true transformation. And that's really what we're talking about with Agentic IT operations here. And I think that's where the magic starts to come in. So you can kind of see how we're shifting this conversation from where we have been in the past around efficiency to really transforming into like autonomous digital systems and operators, which is really exciting. I've been chatting a lot. See, I'm curious, like what you see as the biggest opportunity for agentic IT operations compared to especially compared to where organizations are right now.
Yeah, yeah. Like you used a word that I love, Katie, like conversation. Like the biggest shift from where we move from AI ops to agentic IT ops is we're really moving from an AI augmentation on the one side to a conversation on the other side. Like this is the first time in history where we've been able to talk to our solution space. And so we now have a technology that allows us to be conversant with the solutions that we're trying to make sure that we're sustaining, right? And
Mhm.
the obvious bit is like we can save time and money, money in the form of personnel surface area reduction, I guess. Just a general reduction of manual procedures, whether it's troubleshooting, incident communications, maybe it's after action analysis or reporting. All of these are faster and more consistent and more likely to get done. Like the dirty secret of process operations is maybe some of those things at the front of the list got done, but routinely getting the last bits done maybe happens, maybe it didn't, right? Like and this is our traditional operational reality. Another
Yep.
thing that I think that agentic AI is bringing to the fore is that we're offering equal access to the solution space finally because we can have this conversation. Leadership has just as much access to agentic AI as a technologist does. So agentic AI is as simple as asking a question. Everybody knows how to ask a question. And then I think lastly, when we look at it from a traditional process standpoint, for the last 30 years, we have necessarily leaned into ITIL and ITSM as basically the foundation and the way that we did business. And we're seeing a dramatic shift left in procedure. For instance, root cause analysis in a traditional ITSM model was actually one of the very last things that we did. Like after all the dust had settled, we'd get in a meeting room and hash it out and go, okay, why did this actually happen? Do we need to create a problem record? And we're seeing with agentic AI that those things are shifting dramatically left in the process. So we are actually redefining process from the way that we realized it in an ITSM world.
Yeah. All great points. I mean, I think one theme I hear there is this is a little bit of really just kind of questioning the status quo. We have done these things for many, many years. Does it have to be that way? What if is understanding what the possibility, opening yourself up to what the possibility could be. And to your point, asking the question and seeing if there is a more efficient, more automated way to be able to do that. And I think that's really what comes into play here with agentic IT operations.
For sure.
I don't want to, kind of only tell the glossy side of this because I know this all sounds wonderful and idyllic but there's a reality here, right? And I think we're really on the forefront, which is quite exciting. But the reality is achieving this is not something that many folks have done in the past. And so, many of you who are out here, you're on these conversations, you're in this call, and you're out there trying to trailblaze a path, but there is not a lot of guidance, right? And especially guidance or kind of use cases and things that have been proven. But that's really why we're here to help. But I just want to acknowledge that you are hearing a lot of different warnings and hearing a lot of challenges around things like your data has to be absolutely perfect. You need to hand over everything, all of your data, right? Of course, everyone's concerned around the costs with AI, which is completely relevant, especially, just in where we are with this economy. And, I think there's also folks that are thinking about how does my IT operations data strategy compare to my overarching corporate data strategy? Lots of concerns, right? And I think the other one is also just value, right? What is the value? It's not super clear. If it is clear, it's also how long will it take to achieve that value? All things that we keep in mind here at BigPanda, and we want to make sure our folks are, adhering to. I'll just share one thing that I heard last week from, one of a CIO that we work with. he mentioned this on this kind of concept of value. And when you're addressing agentic solutions, it's, identify a problem that your business has. What is a challenge that you are looking to solve, and tie AI to that use case, right? Think about, don't boil the ocean. Pick one problem and try to solve it with AI. So you're kind of like taking little baby steps and measure that, be able to measure it, and don't get married to it. If it doesn't work, move on, and I think that really kind of breaking it down into these smaller chunks is what's helpful. But I know, like you're hearing these concerns every day. Like what stands out to you as kind of the major themes you're hearing from customers?
Yeah. Like, can I say all of the above? They're all legitimate, right? But if I had to pick one that enjoys primacy, it would be the kind of the top two. The fear or assumption that agentic AI needs every scrap of data that the enterprise, has before business value can be realized, and that further that information must be pristine in its demeanor. This is just not the case. It's not the case on the whiteboard, and it's certainly not the case in the field. The ground truth is, starting with even a subset of an organization's ITSM data yields immediate business value. Like the moment you've got the first pass at that knowledge graph built, you can begin to ask for insights off of it, and they are very real. Of course, the more the merrier, which is not something you can always say in the technology space, but it is actually true for agentic AI and the knowledge graphs that underpin all of the reasoning that takes place.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's really the crux of why we are here today, is to really talk about kind of how you can approach bringing data into your agentic solution, specifically in agentic IT operations, in a way that makes sense for your organization. And what, here at BigPanda, like I said, we're in this agentic journey with all of you. We're really focused on driving, making sure you're driving adoption of these platforms and ultimately delivering value. Like what are the problems that you're looking to solve, making sure you solve those problems and can prove that success to your peers, to your leadership. And so, in the last 18 months or so, we've been really working very closely with our customers as they deploy these AI and agentic capabilities. And we've really developed an approach to what we think makes sense for data. And that's really this idea of an incremental data strategy, right? Like as C was saying, we know the more data and knowledge that you feed it, the better the output. But that doesn't mean that you have to start with sharing absolutely everything under the sun, or the keys to the kingdom, whatever you want to say it. We really believe that this kind of phased approach is the way to go. As we can see here, this is the way, with our friend Grogu. But I think when you're able to kind of progressively expand, you're able to kind of solve specific use cases for specific teams. You can identify clear and measurable results for each of those use cases. So you can kind of show, like, this is milestone 1. Here's our metric. Really be able to prove that, right? You can make sure that this works for your architecture, for your organizational structure, whatever makes sense. But also, and probably most importantly, you're getting that time to value in a period of time that really allows you to show some of that ROI, show some of the progress that you are making. So this is kind of the foundation of what we're talking about here with this incremental data strategy. Anything you want to add here, C, just on how we're kind of at high level, how we're approaching this?
Yeah, like yes to all of the above. Like we're grounding this in process, really. Like when we think about where we're applying agentic AI in our market, it really has to do with the processes involved with our critical services and maintaining them. And like you said, establishing a foundation for business value is critical. And it's it's at the front of everybody's minds. It's like, okay, agentic AI is great, but we've all seen all of the alarming studies, like, there's no business value being squeezed out of this. So this is why we start with the processes, and we create a dialogue with the enterprise and say, okay, how is it that you're doing business? Whether it's in your incident process or your problem process or your change process, like meet everybody where they're at. As much as we have common denominators in our processes across the enterprise, every enterprise is different. So we have to discuss this with the process teams and leadership for those teams and say, how is it that you guys are doing it? And then jointly agree on like, okay, where are the high value targets in all of this? If we were to improve like no more than 3 things, I think you made an excellent point earlier, Katie, like don't boil the ocean, like pick 1 or 2 or at most 3 things, focus on those. And then, and only then, once they're identified, like then begin mapping technology to that. And then begin to understand like which data sources are going to enable our ability to facilitate, this target. This way we start with business value and we can make sure that it can be measured and carried through the entire process so that when we get to the end of it and we're deployed, we're not asking like, how do we know if we did anything worthwhile, and everyone's like casting about for, is there some business value here? Maybe it felt exciting, but like, how does it affect the ultimate way that we measure our success, which quite frankly is always time or money.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, all very good points. And I think even before we kind of dig into that a little bit deeper, I do just want to kind of acknowledge kind of why this is so important to us here at BigPanda, because we've talked a little bit about, C mentioned the knowledge graph. I've talked about this sort of like operational intelligence layer. But the reality is here at BigPanda, our platform is built on the IT knowledge graph, which is this collection of varied data and knowledge sources. We will take in whatever you have from your organization that is indicative of past incidents, how your systems and your services and your infrastructure is performing, how to resolve things, right? Everything from change records, run books, all of this data comes into the knowledge graph. And this is why it is so crucial for us to really be able to figure out that data strategy, because then when you have that data strategy in play, that is what allows you to actually really unlock the value of this platform, whether that is automating your L1 operations through this in detection and response, whether you're automating your major incident management processes with our incident assistant Biggie, providing those really rich insights to L2s, L3s, SREs, or the holy grail, as we've talked about, is being able to really be able to predict and prevent incidents. Because the more that you have this data and knowledge and understanding, sort of kind of something we're playing around with this as this kind of idea of it's like a digital replica of your organization, of your IT organization that goes into this knowledge graph. And that really fuels each of these 3 products to be able to deliver the outcomes that you need. And again, it really comes back to the fact that you do not have to give us or give BigPanda all of these things at once, but like really, how do we approach that in a phased way? And see, you started to talk a little bit about sort of how we're building those agentic data strategies. I know we talked a little bit earlier just around how trust is so important. And, I'm coming off a fresh like 3 weeks of customer events. And so the concept of data governance, AI governance came up many, many times, and folks asking questions just around, how do I know that what I stand over is going to be secure? So I know there's a lot of concern there, but I do think a key piece of this process is building that trust, which was another one of the themes that came up, and really seeing BigPanda as one of those trusted partners. I think that's when we're most successful, is when our team is essentially an extension of your team to really understand what your goals are, because every single org is set up differently, has different priorities, but really understanding those goals is important. Also, we talk a lot about observability and CMDB and ITSM, but even that's generic. Every organization has different data sources that are either high quality or low quality, are delivering more value, more insights, monitoring certain applications. And, we got to really understand that sort of, how those exist in your org before we can make any recommendations. And just as like C was saying, we need milestones. We don't want this to be a 12 or 18th month process where you're questioning what the value is. This is something we break down into very achievable milestones with clear metrics that can then be achieved and then also translated to your business goals. And that's really the foundation of how we approach a data strategy.
Yeah. 100%. Like understanding the goals is fundamental to the way that we execute our deployments at BigPanda. I would like to kind of drill into data sources just a little bit, because I think like historically we've been habituated to think of data sources in the way that you described them, Katie. Very machine data oriented, very static, CMDB, payloads coming from observability, things of that nature. And Agentic AI, a lot of its power is that we have unlocked this, this conversational information. Like you alluded to this earlier in the talk, but we've actually heard it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, in enterprise leadership, where they recognize already that a great deal of their intellectual property and their understanding and their ability to remediate issues is in chat conversations or in some brilliant, employee's head. And in the moment those things surface themselves, provided all the right people are in the room. But there's been no way historically to capture that information and like leverage it for folks that maybe it's their first month on the job and they don't have all of this tribal knowledge that all the old salts do. So we're definitely seeing where this conversational information can be incorporated into the knowledge graph in such a way that it becomes a continuous improvement process. Like, not only are we taking data that we've never been able to successfully re-leverage, if you will, over and over, but now we are getting it into the knowledge graph such that anybody can come along and take advantage of that. The other thing that we see with this, especially with the continuous kind of improvement cycle of creating great collateral that then becomes part of the knowledge graph, is that many of the structures that we've had in the past in the form of run books or knowledge documents get stale. It's hard to stay on top of this stuff. Like last month, this was the way, so to speak, right? This month, it may no longer be the way. Honestly, our solution space is more ephemeral than it's ever been. And we know that it's only going to get more so. It's going to become more fleeting and vaporous in its demeanor, and it's going to start moving at higher and higher velocities unless we have systems like Agentic AI that continuously, update and bolster this knowledge that we're working from. We literally don't stand a chance. So Agentic AI is not really a choice. It's like not if, but when. And we now have all of these new tools that at least make it a fair fight, which honestly, for the last 10 years, really hasn't been. Operational response personnel have had a challenge that is, they really haven't had the tools to do what they need to do. And now that's changed.
You mentioned that, constantly evolving. What was true last month is not necessarily true this month. What does the kind of like ongoing, I don't know, maintenance, like, support for the knowledge graph and your data strategy really look like for some of the enterprises that you're working with to be able to flex with that? Because I'm sure that some folks are listening and saying like, okay, that's true. We do evolve. How do I make sure that remain our, the source of truth remains true?
Yeah. And this is where we lean into the functions of Agentic AI. And like earlier, we had spoken about the fact that the way that we view process historically and the way that we're going to view it in the coming decade are dramatically different. It doesn't mean that we have to shift in an uncomfortable way, but we're definitely going to modify the way that we do business, and necessarily so, to address the things that you're talking about. Like in the past, we had to very laboriously create a lot of this information collateral, right? And now we are using Agentic AI and just saying, please generate an after action report for this incident, and it knows the format that you need for your company. It does it, exhaustive level of detail, not too much, but just the right, things verified against not only the immediate context, but all the historical context that it knows about. And then it folds that into the graph. So we have become more orchestrators than we have in the past. Instead of very manual scribing and creating, we literally had to handcraft all of this information. And that's not the case. And we always knew that it didn't scale. Like, we've been fighting that truth for some time. But again, now we lean into these capabilities, and this is how the knowledge graph stays up to date. It's just slight modifications in the way that we do our process, learning to trust the technology as it exonerates itself, and start to leverage these things to our advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the opportunity to provide feedback, right, on this knowledge that we're bringing in, and being able to, this is relevant, this is not, but that feedback loop that's built into the platform as well really allows you to kind of tweak, and the system starts to know what is relevant and what is not over time. Again, that's like idea, get smarter and smarter.
Yeah, in a very conversational manner. Like, when we first started messing with AI, it was like, okay, you can say good or bad.
Right.
And honestly, from an engineering perspective, it's really hard to take that level of really coarse granularity, feedback, and make it into some, amazing insight in the system. But agentic AI is literally, it's conversant in your solution space. So when you give it feedback, you can give it feedback like you would give your colleague feedback. Hey, this worked for me. These are the things I liked about it. These are the things I need you to improve in the future. That literally goes into the system. From that point on, the knowledge graph is aware that this is a good thing. These are things that we need to tune up. Next time you ask me that question, I'll do better. And that level of like improvement via feedback, not previously available.
Yeah. And what I love about it too is also, I feel like traditionally feedback has been something that maybe a developer or engineer has to implement. This is something that is accessible for all skill levels, technical levels, to be able to provide that feedback and be able to respond because of that conversational nature of it, which is fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
So I want to take a one click down. We've been chatting a lot about theoreticals around data strategies, but as you saw, we have really 3 core products within our platform. And I wanted to take a moment to do a little bit of a spotlight and a deep dive on just how see you address approaching a data strategy, a phased data strategy with clients and enterprises that are approaching our BigPanda AI incident assistant, are also known as Biggie, which is really, this is the product that is really focused on automating major incident management processes. There's a lot of tasks and mobilization and coordination that has to happen throughout that process, as well as being able to deliver insights to whether folks that are responding, whether that's an L2, an SRE, whoever it might be. But just that's really what this product does. And obviously there's a lot of data that is relevant to an organization in that process. But I'm curious, how do you typically approach this with an enterprise?
Pragmatically. Okay. So you start with the front line. Obviously, the most difficult thing for operational response personnel is the moment of an incident, especially if it's a major. Like, you've got to meet the enterprise there and give them some assistance on the front line. And that is like your chat technologies, your ITSM data stores. Who owns this? Who should I call? It's the middle of the night. Do I call a different person than I would during the daytime, et cetera? These are things where we've referenced spreadsheets and run books and all of this very archaic nature of data in the past. And so those are the data sources that we have to start with, because those address the immediate pain of critical service outage, right? Like, this is what it all boils down to. Critical services that either impact our brand or our revenue or our customer sentiment. We simply can't afford to have those down. So that's the first thing that we have to address. Second phase, the slide lays it out beautifully. Like, I can't improve on it. You add to that first layer of let's get our arms around the fire, to how can we put the fire out faster? Like, we reach out to observability systems in real time, literally querying them through the agentic AI. What do you know about this situation? Get into whatever, organizational knowledge may exist in standard operating procedure or past incidents, etc. That bit, bringing the historical knowledge immediately available into the moment of response was also something that was very difficult to do. Like, you would oftentimes see it as a step when you talked about a process formally, the procedure, like, oh, look at all the changes that have done. You know what? The truth was, operational personnel were trying to put out the fire. They couldn't go into the change control system and like do this very involved, human review of like, was this caused by change? Yeah, it probably was, 60, 70% of the time it always is. Wasn't able to do that. So that's the second layer of the cake. And then the last bit, we get back to that data that simply was not data that we could mine, was not data that we could encode in the past, at least not effectively. And that really becomes the frosting on the cake, like chat histories, call transcriptions, that is like incredibly new. We know that we are very, like, the talent that we bring into an incident when we're responding to it is often diverse and deep, but that is not reflected in our data structures. That's knowledge that's in the head of our humans, right? And that knowledge has simply been off limits. So we get the first two layers on. The last bit of shared knowledge becomes the frosting. We've got a brand new way to have our cake and eat it too. If I'm going to beat this analogy right into the ground.
Yeah. Fantastic. Two questions for you, thinking like, if folks are on this call really thinking about like how would they apply this? What would this look like in their organization? Is like, one is, what is like the general timeline that you typically see? Like, how long does it take to get some of these sort of stood up and starting? Like, what's that typical first milestone really look like, or even second? And then the second question is like, do you typically see folks starting with like, yeah, we're going to start with this first, like really focusing on ITSM and on call, or do you sometimes have clients that are interested in a bigger swath of data and sharing that? So like, what is like, it's hard to say, but like, what's a typical kind of?
Yeah, I think, I think for the by and large, folks, there's a bit of trepidation, and the enterprise really does want to start with that first row there, right? And I think that that's great, because we build confidence as we go, not just confidence in the technology, but our leadership is able to see demonstrable business value. A lot of times there is a hesitance, and an understandable hesitance, to just like leap into the deep pool, into the pool when it comes to Agentic AI and say, we're all in, man. We're going for all the data sources. Give us all the stuff. Like, most leadership is pragmatic. This is a new warp in the evolution of the technology space. And so we begin at the beginning, and then we can say like, okay, we did this first step. We're getting this business value. We're getting our calls together quicker. We're getting the right people on the call. We don't have as much call sprawl where it's just like, get everybody, until we have this mean time to innocence kind of thing. So you start there and you can see that, okay, this is working out. Let's go to that second layer. But you do have more advanced enterprises that they simply have more resources at their disposal. They may have more on-staff expertise, people like you might find at BigPanda that actually exist in the enterprise. And they're like, we know exactly what we want to do. We want to do it all, but even those folks are going to go by the numbers. Like, you begin at the beginning. There's a reason that there's a sequence to this, not only so you can make sure that you're capturing that value and that it's bringing real kind of usable methodologies to the organization, but also that everybody's gaining confidence in it. Like, this is relatively new, even for us folks. This is relatively new in our careers, right? So you need to get a confidence that, hey, this actually works. We've seen it here. Now I'm more comfortable going to this next level. So there is this progression that is kind of naturally followed, and we're seeing that in the field.
Yeah. Absolutely. Wonderful. I think one thing I just want to call out. So what we're looking at here is really a snapshot on one of our products, but we do have an approach. This is all pulled from an ebook that we have done recently, where we have specific phase strategies for AI detection and response, AI incident prevention as well. So I definitely encourage you to certainly check out that ebook. I'll drop the link just in our announcements channel of the platform. But I think, one of the things that I hear from you, C, and I want folks to take away from this is, we work at the pace at which you want to work. If you have the resources to be able to really move, and the approval to really move fast, we can do that. And if it's something you want to really take at, smaller milestones, that's also something that we can achieve. And I think that's really part of this like trusted partnership, is understanding the pace at which you want to work. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, C. I really appreciate it. A lot of really good intel there. I want to just kind of end our conversation today with just kind of, I did just drop our ebook link into the announcements channel. Feel free to check that out. What we kind of covered today was really a snapshot of that. If you wanted to go in more depth, feel free to check that out. You can certainly learn more at our website, but I think, we'd love to chat with you and, not just talk, share a little bit more about our platform. We only covered that briefly, but kind of show you what that looks like, and also start to understand what your goals are when you're thinking about, or your problems, as we say. What are you looking to solve for, that you are looking towards Agentic IT operations, and we can work with you to really figure out that problem, or figure out that solution for you. There is a good question that just came in from Dennis in our chat that I think could probably be something that we might want to answer. So Dennis, thank you for sharing that question. But, the question here is, what role does human in the loop play in agentic IT operation workflows? And how is AI bias or error mitigated within the decision-making process?
If I was to take a stab at that, I think that we're kind of offering our human counterparties higher order work. You're beginning, you're moving from having to do so much of the manual procedure yourself to being more of an orchestrator, more of an approver. As the system makes suggestions to you, as you see things evolve during the incident or the response, you can just kind of orchestrate how things are going, instead of having to do it all yourself, right? And as far as AI bias or error mitigated, like, this gets back to the point that you made, Katie, about feedback. Like, an AI can learn, and agentic AI is better at it than any AI that we've fielded in the industry to date. So if we understand that, hey, this response wasn't ideal, but in the future, I want you to give me this, this kind of response. I need you to correct this particular thing, or I need you to put a greater emphasis on the following bullets, etc. The system can take that into consideration, right? And then we also have like guardrails or insurance that we can put in, like in prompt addendums or in the configuration of the system itself. You can put in anti-hallucinatory, language and context, such that the system is already kind of like, I need to be super safe. When I'm talking to Dennis, like, it's got a very specific thing he wants out of me. So those two things combined really go a long ways toward bias and error. And the way that it changes the operator's role is you just get out of a lot of the scut work, and you're moving faster, saying, yes, do this. Instead of doing a lot of logging in, etc., you're saying things like, troubleshoot this, provide me after action. Like, you just become more effective.
Yeah. I think, especially on the human in the loop, I just want to add that, this is something we do not expect any organization to adopt, truly agentic or autonomous solutions tomorrow, right? Like, this is going to be an evolution or a maturity, and it all comes with, kind of credibility building, trust building. And part of that is that feedback loop and ensuring that bias is not there, tweaking the outputs of the AI. So you kind of gain more and more trust in what those agents are doing. So you can sort of, move from becoming a manager of the humans to a manager of agents, as C was saying. But I think it really is an evolution. And that's really what went back to the platform. So that's really what we're trying to do here is, sure, we're talking about this concept of automating your L1 operators, but like, they're not going away tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, that is not what's happening here.
Yeah.
This is something that is going to take time. So I just want to make sure that is clear. And that's what this platform is enabling. It's, employ agents and automation where you can, and where you have that trust, where you have that knowledge and really strong responses, and then build that up in other areas so you can kind of improve those, move from sort of human assisted or agent assisted to more fully autonomous and agent run workflows in the future.
As you become comfortable, and we see this with our own clientele at BigPanda, like the system needs to prove that it can do what you need it to do in a reliable fashion. If the system can't prove that to you very, very demonstrably, then you shouldn't trust the system. And so what we've seen with our enterprise clients at BigPanda is that this is an evolution. You kind of dip your toe in the water before you head down to that previously discussed deep into the pool. We have clients that are just like, take it slow. But eventually we see even some of our enterprises that are like in their change control processes where change velocity is a challenge for everybody. It's like, does everything need to go through a really intense human arbitrated change control? And it's like, no, if the change risk, if the agentic AI is able to say, this is a really low risk change, here are all the things that are really solid about it. We're seeing some of our clients are using that as automated approval. But that is a level of comfort that you evolve toward. And if the system can't convince you that that is indeed a warranted bit of trust, you got the wrong system.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you, C. I think we're just about the end of the time and don't see any more questions in there for right now. So I will just end this by saying, C, thank you for your time and your great insights. I hope this was, for me, it was really helpful, really interesting conversation. I hope it was the same for everyone who joined. Thank you all for joining. And just a reminder, you can go back to this link and share this. We'll also follow up with you and share the link as well. So if you'd like to go back and rewatch. But C, thank you. Everyone, thank you for joining and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.